Okay. Hi, hello everyone. Once again, I'm Nevena. Most of you know me. I work in Youth Initiative for Human Rights at the position of coordinator of outreach program. I will introduce to you our today's speakers, Ms. Sanja Despot. Sanja. Hi, Sanja. Sanja is Deputy Chief Editor at Faktograf. I will tell you more about that soon. And our second speaker is Ms. Branka Vierda, Coordinator of Justice Program and Reconciliation Program in Youth Initiative for Human Rights. So I'm really glad to see you. Wait, we have one more. Okay. I'm really glad to see you all here today. I know these times are crazy and you have a lot of things to do. Maybe some of you are planning to go on some vacation or to take some days off to get your minds off of everything that is happening, and that is really understandable. So that is why I understand why we have not so many participants as I anticipated we would have. But nevertheless, I really hope that we will have a great discussion today with our speakers and with all your contributions. So first of all, why did we decided to do this online? Some you may not know, but in the scope of Political Youth Network, we organize our regional meetings in person, and we tend to gravitate towards some cities that are easy to access to everyone from the region. So we mostly meet in Belgrade or Sarajevo or Zagreb. But now, since we have this situation, we were forced to do this via Zoom. And this is our second time we are meeting this way. First one was only catching up a bit, and this is the first time we have some serious topics on the table. So before we start with our topics, I would just like to explain to you how this will all work out. So first, I will ask Sanja to tell us something about the topic of fake news. Fake news in general as today's phenomena, and as well fake news regarding COVID and Western Balkans and everything that is happening today in the region. And after that, I will ask Branka to tell us, well, I have to make some introduction to Branka's part, because as you all know, we don't have some unified recommendations and guidelines regarding how to handle human rights when it comes to right to vote, freedom of movement, and right to privacy in today's crisis. So Branka will tell us, present us some recommendations and guidelines from Council of Europe and United Nations, and then she will talk us through the situation in Croatia regarding everything that happened. And after that, I will kindly ask you to share your stories from your countries, what is happening in Montenegro, in Serbia, etc. And regarding to that, I ask you to, if you have some questions regarding this, please write them down, because we will have time for that during the Q&A after both speakers finish their presentations. So if we cover that now, I will ask Sanja. We will start with Sanja. Sanja works at, as I said, at Faktograf. She is a Deputy Chief Editor at Faktograf, and Faktograf is the first specialized fact-checking platform in Croatia. And Faktograf has, since its establishment, discovered many and debunked many stories and information, and it is well respected in Croatia and in region as well. And that is why we asked Sanja to join us today. So Sanja, once again, hello. And my first question for you will be to give us a brief intro into the fake news. So if you could define what is fake news today, and how do fake news originate? What is the story behind it?
First of all, talking about fake news is kind of, I mean, we all know what the fake news term is from the time that Trump, American President Trump, actually came to power in America, and he used it so much in so many occasions with the serious media and with everybody, that actually fact-checking organizations for for a time now, prefer to call it disinformations. And that was the term that was, that was in use for since when journalism started, I guess. So it's not really a new phenomena like fake news is something new. No, it's not. I mean, ever since the politics existed and the media existed, we had all sorts of disinformations always. But what's new is phenomena of social networks. That's what's new with Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and the new approach to this dissemination of this disinformations, and by that I mean fact checking, actually started like after Trump gained the power became the president in United States. You mentioned that we are the first fact-checking organization in Croatia, but for now we are first and only. We are still first and only, and we are part of International Fact-Checking Network, and that's since 2017, I guess. So we are trying to our job is twofold. One is fact-checking statements from politicians, and the other is debunking. What we are talking right now in these COVID-19 times, it's more like debunking fake news or disinformation and misinformation about coronavirus and everything that's going on in the world after this novel virus started. So, I don't know whether this answers your question, but if you can be a bit more specific.
Yeah, can you tell me?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard to say who decides what is to become fake news. For example, in Croatia, do we just copy paste some fake news and spread them here, or how that whole process originates?
Yeah, mostly these are the same stories that goes on in the United States, in whole of Europe, and then it enters the region. And sometimes the first one to spread it in the region is some media or Facebook post in Croatia. Sometimes it's in Serbia, sometimes in Bosnia, but basically these are all just the same stuff. And it's not just that there are the same stories and same posts, there are the same trends. Like in the beginning of this infodemia, it all started with the news, whether the virus is spread, do we already have it in the country and stuff like that. Then we witnessed fear among people and all sorts of cures for this disease, like vitamins and all this, garlic and stuff. But right now we are full of theories that combines kind of all sorts of conspiracy theories in one theory, and it's basically 5G, Bill Gates, elite, big pharma. It's all kind of a big theory, and in the center of the theory is COVID-19. So that's where we are right now. Like we are all playing in some invented game that some elite put on us, and now we are kind of struggling for the truth. That is where we are right now.
And I have another question regarding that, and I know it is maybe impossible to answer that, or maybe the answer is too vague, and the question is actually too vague, but what is the goal of fake news? Who profits from it?
Like everything, partly it's political and partly is economical. From the let's go with the former. Since we are here in the region, we are pretty, unemployed and poor people, and it's a kind of industry to start a new portal with the clickbait titles, and to make some money out of Google Ads. And you all know for Veles case in Macedonia, in North Macedonia, in a time before the Trump was elected, and those kids that were making all this, influence on such a big thing such as American elections. But they're just, some kind of, they were all in the media, but they are not alone. In North Macedonia, it's kind of, a job that you have for living, and not just there. It's also in Bosnia and in Serbia and in Croatia, and that is economical, profiting from the Google Ads. And moju lie, moju provoke some, emotional sensations with your titles. You receive more public, and then you receive more likes and more viewers and more money. That's one problem. And the other is, of course, involvement in all kinds of political campaigns, like common knowledge about Trump supporters and their networks. And then we all know what happened before Brexit and how it happened with Cambridge Analytica. So it's kind of twofold, political and economical. And of course, there are some, disinformation by mistake, because when COVID-19 story came out like end of the last year, we didn't know much about the virus, and all sorts of stories emerged. And the good example is Simpson. You probably remember how somebody published first that Simpson predicted the coronavirus. And that was one of the episodes, which wasn't the truth. It was artificial. And all sorts of media, including mainstream media, we all got for the story because the story was funny.
Yeah.
So it's a combination of everything.
Yeah. And regarding that, I have another question. Well, we all know most of fake news are not completely untrue. They always have some aspect on it that sounds probable and true. And the other part is always the one that catches us unprepared. Yeah. So can you tell us how to spot fake news, how to identify them? Is there some kind of a solution for a common reader of some news? I'm not talking about professionals, but common people, how to recognize it?
And now we are on the ground of media literacy. So you have these basics like what's the title like? Is it too sensational? Is it can you really believe? Are you surprised? And then start from the title. Then you have to check who's the author, like which kind of agency. You really have to Google a bit if you are a reader to find out whether the author or the newsroom really exists, and what kind of journalists and other texts are there. So that's kind of basic. And then, of course, you have all these other techniques, how to really, and these other tools, how to really check if some video or photo is engineered and not real. So first of all, is always like, is this story so strange that you cannot believe? And in most of the cases, it's not the truth. So this is how you should start and then proceed. And it's always that mixture, like something that is really happening with something that is really strange. Although lately we receive and we see so many strange stories that they are not believable at all. With all this 5G, birds dying, 5G spreading coronavirus and stuff, so it's not really believable at all.
And can you tell us, because we often see fake news and then someone says, oh, no, that is not true. This is the real story behind it. And we are faced with the situation where we have to believe some credible source on that some information is fake news. So can you go with us through this process of discovering fake news, and how does it look in Faktograf? But for example, you are faced with some misinformation, fake story. How does that look like? So how much effort you have to put in that process for something to be discovered and presented?
Yeah, first of all, we are in COVID-19 times. First of all, you have to rely on official sources. And now we all know that World Health Organization had some mistakes in the beginning, like with symptoms and whether masks are good or not. But you have to rely on something. So we relied on information on this global level from World Health Organization, and in Croatia, Hrvatski zavod za javno zdravstvo, official people. And then, of course, you have these medical magazines that you know that are reliable. A colleague of mine that's doing a great job, she's like reading tens of reports and tens of art in medical magazines to really check what's going on. And of course, like I said in the beginning, it's always the story that is spreading around the globe. And we are right now, through this international fact-checking network, we are connected with, I don't know the exact number, but like like 50 or something fact-checking organizations around the world. And you just have to, in most of the cases, you have to look in the database and to really see whether this story was debunked before. And in more than half of the cases, yes. And also in the region, we are connected in C-Check network. That's the network of 7 fact-checking organizations here in 6 countries, like with raskrinkavanje BA and raskrinkavanje from Montenegro and raskrinkavanje from Slovenia. And that's why I'm mentioning this, because there are some specific kind of disinformation and some specific people here active in the region. Like in Croatia, it's Sladoljev, and in Serbia, it's Nestorovic. Kind of the same stories going around, and we are also very well connected, and we help each other with this. So.
Do you maybe have some comparative data on what are the most common fake news in the region? Are they similar or?
Yes, they are similar, and they're mostly similar with what's going on in the world. It's not like we are having very specific disinformation is spreading. Like from the beginning, the most read story in Faktograf was that behind this all panic around coronavirus, American troops landing in Europe, which was partly true because NATO planned the Defend Europe exercise, and it was planned last year. And it kind of began in the beginning of the year, and then they took them by surprise in February and in March, and eventually nothing happened with the exercise. But at first it was like all the American soldiers are getting to Europe and nobody's sick. So there is no coronavirus at all. It's just a big story, and behind that there is American occupation of Europe, such kind of things. And that was very common in the region, in Croatia and in Bosnia and in Serbia, everywhere. And that's the most read one. And the others are, 5G and Bill Gates, and that is common everywhere around the globe. And George Soros, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, everyone's favorite topic is George Soros at
Yes.
one moment. Can you share with us one story from Faktograf? It can be COVID related or it doesn't have to be. That was most challenging for you to debunk, but you knew that it was a fake news.
Whew. Not for me personally, but a colleague that I mentioned, Ana Benatic, she did all kind of stories on COVID and on fake video, and maybe the one to really mention is Pandemia. It's a video that she debunked altogether with raskrinkavanjem pa, and it had all this all stories combined in a big video that says, like, political elites are doing it behind our backs and everything is a lie. And that was kind of challenging because there are so many theses in there, so many claims that you have to go through. So it's that kind of stories. Nothing really. I mean, we didn't have that kind of a story like a colleague of ours in Lead Stories. Have you heard about Macedonian army officer that was behind this network? So,
share with us.
The colleague of ours from Lead Stories, he's based in Brussels, although it's American fact-checking site. He has this tool to really see in real time which story is spreading fast, and he caught in one time that the stories are spreading from the same place and from the same people in Macedonia. And finally he discovered that it's actually a Macedonian officer standing behind it because for economic gains. And it was, detective stories of he had a driver of a truck that was engaged with him in this operation. So he spotted the track, and then he find the driver, and then he find the connection, and it was finally published on his website, and it was also in Macedonian newspapers. And after that, kind of 70, if I remember correctly, 70 news sites was crashed down because all the news sites were from the same, two men and from the same account, making money from, American elections and European elections, spreading all these news that had all sorts of far right and against immigrants and this kind of content that really spread fast. So it was all over media. We didn't have such stories because ours are very persistent. They kind of answer us with threats and, make video on us. So.
Regarding that, my last question to you would be regarding ethics in journalism. So nowadays we can see journalists all over the world, not only in the region, that do not care about the ethics or moral in journalism. And once we knew when something was said on the news, we would believe it because we believe those journalists are professionals in their jobs. And what do you expect of the journalism as a profession in the future? Because we don't see any journalists really fall from grace regarding these fake stories. How do you see it now?
Yeah, first of all, I have to say that the situation is not the same all over the region. In Croatia, we are not, like living in a free world or whatever. We have all sorts of, problems, but still the situation is not comparable to, let's say, Serbia. We don't have such press conferences where everybody, is kind of happy with the leader and listening to him and stuff. So it's not really comparable. In Croatia, in mainstream media, we still have lots of journalists that are, doing their job properly. And if we talk about debunking, this is mostly on websites that employ people that you cannot really call them journalists from the point of view that they're not able to really write a story and they do not know how to write a story. Then they don't have ethics at all. And when we started with this debunking, and I don't remember did I mention it or not, we are working for Facebook in this third-party fact-checking program, which means that when we encounter some disinformation, we kind of flag it for Facebook. And when we first started with that, these organizations and these news portals told us, can you please give us some workshop? We don't actually know how to write a story and not to tell a lie. And then we had to explain that there is some kind of, you have the obligation for your editorial policy, you have to have journalists, you have to have editors, you have to have responsible editors, and then you'll have the media. It's not like you just open the site and call yourself a media. And if we talk about debunking, and if we talk about journalism in general, I really don't see how the future of journalism will proceed. I think that in the end, somewhere, we cannot be satisfied with these social networks and your little space where you can exchange your thoughts and not really have objective journalism with editorial policy. And I think we should go in that direction, but what will happen in the end, I don't know.
Thank you, Sanja, very much. Please stay with us. We will now talk with Branka, and then we will have time for questions and some discussion. So please, everyone, if you have some questions for Sanja regarding fake news, write it down, or you found something interesting she said, write it down, and we can discuss that after Branka finishes her presentation. So, hi, Branka.
Hi.
Again. Now we will focus on our next topic, which is human rights, and especially freedom of movement, right to vote, and right to privacy. And before Branka starts, I want to just make one disclaimer. You all know probably that there is no one unified set of rules or recommendations and guidelines when it comes to these topics on the regional or European level. So Branka will tell us something more about Council of Europe and United Nations guidelines. And she will go in some details about situation in Croatia regarding these topics. And then you are all free to contribute with the examples from your own countries or your communities respectively. So that is it for me for now. So Branka, I have a question following on that. I have a question for you now. Can you walk us through those recommendations which you tell us about? Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Nevena, for having me. Zdravo svima. Hello to everyone. I will, at the beginning, I will briefly introduce the current situation regarding human rights in the COVID-19 era, if it's fine with you, just briefly, and give some opinions and recommendations, as you, Nevena, said, given by the United Nations and Council of Europe. So just to make a brief introduction, as you all know, the world is facing an unprecedented crisis, and at its core is a global public health emergency on a scale not seen for centuries. What is very important to emphasize. So there is a large requirement for a global response with far-reaching consequences for our economic, social, and political lives. As Sanja said, same issue we have with fake news, also with human rights. They are in the scope of economic and social and political lives in the era of COVID-19. So there is no solution that one country can gain. So the situation will be covered for all countries, nor in region, nor in Europe, nor in world. I will now share my screen to give you just can okay. Can you see it? Yes.
Yes.
Oh, great. So we will focus on three major parts. What we find very important. One of them is freedom of movement. This is the topic of human rights in the era of COVID. A huge topic and huge challenge for whole world. So we don't have, in these 15 minutes, we don't have enough time to deal with every human right particularly. So the scope of this little lecture, these three rights, as you know, mentioned: freedom of movement, right to vote, and right to privacy. When we talk about United Nations recommendations, and when we are talking about these six messages United Nations gave us, they 1 month ago they gave us
Branka,
set of recommendations. There are like 30 of them, scope of human rights in countries. So these are the messages.
Samo sekund. Ljudi, da li čujete Branku?
Ne, ima malo poteškoća.
Ok. Branka? Ne čujemo te dobro.
Very important.
Branka?
So they are related to protect.
Samo sekund. Branka, da li se čujemo? Sorry guys, we have some issues with Branka's internet. Hopefully we will. Okay, just a second. Okay. Okay, so Branka will join us in a second. We have some technical issues, and then we will proceed. Okay. Unmute, please.
Yes. Can you hear me now? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
I'm back in the game. Sorry for this. We have some internet connection problems. So I was sharing the screen. Okay, and we were at the part of United Nations messages. You can see it? Yes.
No.
Yes. Okay, so we were talking about messages related to people's lives as a priority, connection between virus and discrimination, question which focuses on everyone in response to COVID-19 crisis, not just particularly states or individuals. Bearing in mind that the threat is the virus, not the people, also in the scope of discrimination. As I already said, no country can be this alone, so we are in this whole together, which is, I would say, the positive part of this crisis. And one positive thought for as a last message of United Nations gave us: when we recover, we must be better than we were before. We should all believe in those messages and try to make them real in our own lives. When we talk about Council of Europe and toolkit for member states, there are in scope of respecting democracy, rule of law and human rights in the framework of COVID-19 sanitary crisis. Then I will just briefly introduce these four recommendations that are find very interesting for countries in Western Balkans also, same as United Nations recommendation. And you will, both of these documents, especially you participants of youth political branches of political parties, I think you can find them very useful while and when talking with your fellows in political parties, when you try to create some public policies that are related to human rights in the era of COVID-19. So I can share these documents with Neven, and she can share it with you. So these are, as I already said, UN framework, UN messages, UN recommendations, and Council of Europe recommendations. So these four, I hope you read them while I was talking.
Branka, ne vidimo screen. We don't see.
Sorry. Okay. I will bring it back. That's even better. You were listening, you weren't reading, so that's fine. You can see it now? Yeah, great. So these four recommendations that Council of Europe established are related to derogation from the European Convention on Human Rights in times of emergency. We will talk about that a little bit in the scope of Croatian situation. Same as United Nations mentioned, same situation is with the Council of Europe with following recommendations in the scope of respect of the rule of law and democratic principles in times of emergency. So not to forget democratic principles. We should all remember that part, because it's very important, I would say, especially for countries in our region. And one topic that is very important, and it doesn't have enough place in public spaces, gender-based violence, particularly in this era of COVID-19, and it's very important. That is one of the four recommendations Council of Europe gave us. So as Nevena already mentioned and introduced, I will now talk a little bit about Croatian situation regarding challenges when we talk about freedom of movement, right to privacy, and right to vote. And I think you will find it interesting.
Branka, we don't hear you well. Branka, we don't hear you. Something went wrong. Something froze again, sorry. Branka? Okay, something, my apologies. Branka, okay. Branka will be back in a few minutes. She had some difficulties, and while she's away, I will just want to make some bridge so you could understand why we chose these topics. At first, they may seem like they are totally different. So fake news and these regulations. Branka is here. Just a second. And these human rights regulations regarding right to vote, freedom of movement, and right to privacy. But we picked them and singled out them because we find them as the most important at the moment in the region, because we all are faced with same situation, same crisis, and these things, so fake news regarding COVID-19 and these rights came into the spotlight when everything started. And plus, on all of that, we had several elections in the region during this time, so things got really complicated. And that's why we decided to put these topics together. And Branka is here again. Hopefully, we'll hear her now. So Branka, you have the floor again.
Thank you. I'm very sorry. It's not my fault. I don't know what is happening with internet connection. We didn't have any problems since now, so really sorry. But maybe it's better to have a little break so you can have a little small chat. And now I will continue. We stopped at the beginning about the Croatian situation. And I wanted to mention, when we talk about human rights, not only in Croatia but in the region at the time of the pandemic, then we are talking about situation in which is necessary to regulate the existing situation on two grounds: under existing laws or with new regulations. If we concentrate on freedom of movement, or to be more precise on restricting of movement, then this issue is resolved in the Croatian framework by the law on the protection of the population from infectious diseases. Why this law is important? It stipulates that the Minister of Health, at the proposal of the Croatian Institute of Public Health, may order special security measures to protect the population from infectious diseases, including restrictions on freedom of movement in infected or directly endangered areas. On the other hand, what is particularly interesting to us today are the new measures restricting human rights and the use of which would be possible only on the basis of new laws. When we talk about new laws, the good example is, I would say, an example of amendment to the Electronic Communications Act, which seeks to legally enable location via mobile phone for the purposes of conducting civil protection activities in times of natural disaster, catastrophe, epidemic, or epidemic danger. Bearing in mind that this is a new measure, which in this form does not yet exist in our legal system, and that according to our constitutional law experts, we are in a situation defined by the Croatian constitution as a state of major national disaster, Croatian parliament should decide to amend this by a 2/3 majority of all deputies. Given that the pandemic era is a kind of a great natural disaster, for any new legal measure which restricts human rights, Parliament actually must make this decision by 2/3 of majority of all deputies. That was issue we were dealing through all these months from the moment pandemia began. And I will be very happy and glad to hear what kind of situation, what kind of experience in other countries are happening and coping with human rights and amendments towards existing laws in, for example, Serbia, Bosnia, and all the participants that are here today with us. I will now give also one important, I think I will emphasize also for future situations regarding human rights restrictions. During April, I think that there was a great possibility in the public space to start as I already said, monitoring the mobile phones of persons who were prescribed a measure of self-isolation. Luckily, this amendment didn't happen because civil rights organizations were very pushy towards this issue, and this amendment wasn't brought to light. Also, one situation that is happening in Croatia, and I think all countries in the region have the same problem, is regarding National Civil Protection Authority. Since they are not political body, it is really not fair to expect for them to take responsibility for decisions that are actually political, and the limitations of fundamental rights are both legal and political. Some constitutional law experts also emphasize that these measures should not be derived from law on the protection of the population from infectious diseases, but with a law on the civil protection system. So as you can notice, we have a lot of problems regarding which law is mostly important to cope with this pandemic when we talk about restriction of human rights. And I will actually close this first part with with few sentences regarding right to vote. I think that is one of the most important human rights on which it is very important to pay attention, given that some countries involved in political youth network already had parliamentary elections at the time of COVID, and some are yet to follow. So it might be, I find it might be useful to hear something about Croatian experiences. The right to vote cannot be taken away from someone just because they are ill. That was a comment of one of Croatian constitutional law experts, because on the eve of the elections, the question arose on how to enable the right to vote for people that are positive on COVID-19. That was the time when it was like 2 weeks ago that State Election Commission stated that the sick could not go to polls, nor could they invite members of the polling station committee to come to them. Moreover, those who suspect that they might be infected should abstain from Sunday's election. And these are, according to the Election Commission, all those whose body temperature is higher than 37 degrees on Sunday, or feel respiratory or some other symptom that could indicate COVID-19. This was a situation when also civil society organization and Croatian constitutional legal experts commented and stated that it is very, very important to provide to COVID-19 positive persons or to those who are in self-isolation right to vote, and that epidemiologists should prescribe measures regarding this situation. This is, I would say, this was a very complicated situation, because we had clash of two rights, two basic human rights. On the one hand, we had right to vote. On the other hand, we had the value of public health protection. And when you have this kind of situation, when two rights are in the clash, the criteria of weighing is the best measure is the rule of proportionality. What means that this rule requires that the mildest, the most reasonable and possible measure needs to be adopted. In this situation, the essence of the fundamental human rights, the right to vote, should certainly be preserved. And it should be possible to enable for the COVID-19 positive right to vote without endangering public health. In this brief 15 minutes, I tried to make a brief overview of some of the dominant human rights challenges in this era of COVID-19, and I hope you all will give your experiences from the countries you come from. And I think this is it for the beginning. I think it's okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Branka, very much. I forgot I was muted. Thank you for this. So now will be the time for Q&A and for discussion. So I would like just to remind you some of the main bullets about the topics we covered today. So we had fake news regarding COVID-19 in the region, what Sanja told us about. So if you have any questions for Sanja regarding that, or you want to share some of your experiences with fake news in your countries, please do that now. Or if you wrote down some inspiring quotes of Sanja's, you can comment on that as well. Regarding Branka's part, we had location of the mobile phone. We had that situation with right to privacy, which clashed with right to privacy when our government wanted to follow people who might be infected with this situation. Police hour, we didn't have police hour in Croatia, but Serbia had police hour. So if someone from Serbia wants to share their experience with that and what was the situation behind that. And elections and self-isolation as well. So we had elections, and I personally have a friend who was in self-isolation, and he was able to vote because the people came to him and gave him the opportunity to vote at home. But if you have some examples from Serbia, Croatia, Serbia, Montenegro, Bosnia, Kosovo, please do share with us. So floor is yours. If you have some questions, please do that now. Oh, Fiona asked, okay.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Fiona Ilici from Youth Initiative for Human Rights in Belgrade. Before I tell you something more or something at all about the situation in Serbia regarding the COVID-19 situation, I wanted to ask you actually, do you find the elections in the time of COVID that were recently in Croatia, did you find them like a threat to national health? And what were the measures that were used during the election day actually? Also, I'm interested how many huge gatherings regarding the pre-election period did you have before the elections? Yeah, because we have, the matter of elections in Serbia and during the pandemic is like one of the main problems and issues that is talked about these days in Serbia.
Branka, would you like to answer to Fiona? Or okay, thank you.
Thank you, Fiona. I can give you my personal opinion, and we can talk a little bit about State Election Commission rules and the clashes between the State Election Commission and constitutional legal experts and NGOs, since there was a huge clash about opinion regarding the rules, how elections should be regulated. I think first of all, in next 15 or 10 days, we will find out how did it go and what kind of rules were had a maybe good attention and had a good reasoning and what actually happened during Sunday elections. when I went to my poll, everything was regulated in a scope of fact that everybody had a mask, everybody had its own pencil, so the social physical distance was established, so everything was by the book. But I think the major problem was the when Parliament decided that we should have elections in the period of pandemic. I think that was at the beginning wrong decision. Just to put it briefly like that. When Parliament and then President decided that we must have elections, there was no legal ground that it can be postponed. So July was the month when we needed to have elections. So there was no constitutional position which would enable Croatian parliament or Croatian government not to have elections in this period. So this is when we talk about human rights, it is very challenging to deal with everything in this period, and I think that is why it was and it's even now very important to develop some kind of decision that all changes in legal framework must be done with 2/3 of a majority of all representatives in a Croatian parliament. Because when you have crisis, it's already very difficult to bring decisions, and when you do it with a simple majority, then the situation can become more dangerous. I would put it like that. So I don't know if I gave some kind of a framework about our rules and perspectives regarding human rights and right to vote.
Yeah, you explained to us. I was interested also in that, but you explained that on your what's that called in English? Izborno mesto. How do we say that in English?
Election poll.
Election poll, yeah. In your election poll, all the measures were like by the book, while in Belgrade, which was like on 21st of June, many irregularities were noted, and I mean, when I say irregularities, I'm not talking now about the basic election irregularities, but I'm talking about the measures regarding the epidemic. So many of those polls were people weren't wearing masks. There were like way too many people in one room. Also, they were using the same pencils, the same pens. So yeah, I heard that you had the obligation to take your own pens to the election poll. So I mean, I don't know. I think that part of the Serbia situation now is, I mean, the consequence of the elections. The election part is after the elections, and everything that was that happened before the election day, among other things, as we had also the football matches in front of 20,000 people. And so I think the consequences are seen now, actually. As I'm talking now, I can tell you something more about the situation in Serbia in this moment. As you might all know, there are protests throughout the Serbia in this moment. Those protests, first day of protests were like 7th of July, which was 3 days ago. And the trigger of those protests was the president's announcement that there might be a curfew again in Belgrade, because Belgrade is one of the biggest outbreaks of the virus right now. So then people went on the streets. It was There were no official organizers of those protests, so they all went spontaneously, and there were like a few thousand of people there, like with a few days now. It's happening. It will happen also tonight, and but I think it's seen now as a protest against the restrictive measures of the government and the president, but that is not the reason. Actually, Serbia has one specific chart of the COVID-19 spreading. I mean, it was the number of new cases was extremely low in the time before the elections. When I say extremely low, we never went to zero, but it was like at some point below 20. Then it started to grow a bit. A few days before the election, it was like nearly 100, but never went above it. And then after the elections, like few days after the elections, numbers were extremely high. And I think that today we had one of the worst days regarding the COVID-19 situation. So actually the question of the citizens is, did we really manage to have those low numbers in that part between before elections and immediately after them, or were the numbers faked because of the elections? So, and now regarding the protests and why they are happening, how many people are injured, how many policemen are injured, and who starts the violence. As you might see, the protests are quite violent. And there we come also to the fake news, as we encounter the situation where we see that one man who was beaten up by approximately 20 policemen, we find fake news that he is dead. Then we find news that he's critical situation. We find news that he's totally fine. And it's very hard. Maybe that's actually a question for Sanja. In these situations where massive protests are ongoing in Serbia, in many cities, I'm not sure how we are trying, as Youth Initiative for Human Rights, we are trying to monitor the protests throughout the country, but it's very hard to find. If we are not on the spot, it's very hard to find correct information about the protests. So I guess maybe I could ask Sanja for an advice in these situations.
There are no advices when the situation is ongoing. I don't know about this case that you mentioned, but if nobody was on the spot to really see what happened, this kind of story, fake news, this is not I don't know about the case, but I don't see it as a fake news, because it may be just, kind of misinformation because nobody was there and everybody rushed to, get the news out. It always happens in a time of crisis. It's not. I would rather say that what happened yesterday if it was yesterday, with Vucic's press, when there was a story about a guy from Majdanek whose father died, and he was filmed on a protest on N1. Yeah. This, Chale. Yes. Vucic said on a press conference that he lied and that he was kind of a criminal and everything. But it wasn't very hard to find on his Facebook page the post that he posted in the beginning of April. Yeah. It would be, very strange for somebody to plan all this kind of story in the beginning of April, to show on some maybe protest later on. So I don't know about the case that you mentioned before, but I would say that President Vucic was actually saying the fake news, that the guy is a criminal. Maybe he is a criminal, I don't know, but that was not the point. He mentioned the case of his father who actually died, and if I understand correctly, he was not no name. I mean, he was kind of known in his community. So
yes. Just a disclaimer for other people that might not know what's this story about. On the first day of protests, one young man, was filmed by N1 crew on the spot on the protests. And he said
by accident. He was not giving speeches or anything. No. He was just passing by.
He was just passing by, and he just talked towards the journalists. And he said, "Dad, this is for you. My dad, Ljubisha Đurić, has died. He's died of COVID-19, and he died because there was no respirators for him in the hospital in Zemun." Where he died, and then he somehow became one of the symbols of these protests. So there are now T-shirts and this like logo with the fist and "Čale, ovo je za tebe," or "Dad, this is for you." And then President Vučić explained that the boy lied, that his father didn't die because of the lack of respirators, and also pointed out that he has a criminal history. And he said that he had some criminal history in his high school or something like that, which is not relatable. I mean, if he has some small access that he had like in high school, it's not relatable to this situation. Not long after that, so we could see on the social media, I mean on Facebook, we could and Instagram, we could see the report of his dad with his name, surname, his personal number, and the whole his disease and everything about it, and where it was written that he is waiting for the respirator. He's waiting the spot to be a spot for him, because all of them were not available. So actually, we had the evidence of the.
And from the beginning of April, I mean, protests are like going on now, and like he planned the whole situation.
Yeah, so I mean,
I would just say that the only one spreading fake news here is Vučić.
Yes, I agree on that.
Thank you, Fiona, really, for this contribution. It was really informative for those of you who are not who didn't know these things in this situation. And we have another question. Nevena Todorovic, she asked for. Hi, ciao,
everyone. Ciao, I'm the other Nevena from the Youth Initiative, as I'm lovingly called by all of our regional coworkers. So basically, I have two questions. One of them is related to how certain things were regulated during the elections in Croatia, and the other one is related to the international prevention, I guess, of fake news and the international component. So just a quick intro. I was away in the US doing a fellowship when the whole pandemic broke out. So of course I had, my fair share of fake news straight from the American sources, where it's very easy for it to go easy there. And it was almost impossible to find a flight up until right before the elections, when suddenly all of these repatriation flights became available. So I knew that, because of the elections, they're going to encourage expats to come back and people in the diaspora to come back and vote. And the second I landed, I expected there to be some kind of procedure, some kind of measures to prevent, the spread of the virus, because the airplane was full. However, nobody required me to self-isolate. Nobody asked me anything. Nobody gave me any documents. There was absolutely no state-mandated measure for me as somebody who had just traveled from the US, the country which at that point had really, really high infection rates. And I took 3 flights, went through 4 airports. You know, somebody would think that they would give me a paper or ask me a few questions. Nothing. Obviously, this was all done as part of the election campaign. The second I landed on the luggage collection area, there was a huge ruling party, Serbian Progressive Party banner, poster, reminding us from the second we land why we're there. So my question is in relation to the elections. What was the procedure like in Croatia for people who had just returned from the country? Were they required to self-isolate and then had someone come to them? Or how did that work? And my other question is related to fake news. So obviously, Sanja, you mentioned that sometimes the way fake news is spread internationally is that one media portal from the region is going to, you know, repost something that has been said, and then people from the region, other media portals or individuals in social media profiles will disseminate this disinformation. And we saw, while I was there in the US, you know, Trump was really advocating for the use of hydroxychloroquine, which led eventually to deaths in Nigeria because people actually started doing clinical trials to use the drugs. So I was wondering, yes, this is how disinformation can spread internationally. How can we build coalitions to help prevent the spread of disinformation? How can we build these, you know, fact-checking, anti-fake news coalitions that are going to contribute towards stopping this problem? So those are my 2 questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Nevena. Thank you. Sanja, would you like to go first, or?
I may try.
Okay.
Yes, we are right now all the fact checkers globally connected to this international fact checking networks and network, and lots of us are also party in this Facebook's third-party fact checking program, which means that if we flag some news as, you know, misinformative or misleading title or whatever, the Facebook then in some cases related to COVID, they put it down, but mainly they just, you know, kind of regulate the spreading, and they restricted for some 80% a story not to be spread. And actually I have some statistic. Few weeks ago, some people from Facebook on a conference stated that they actually stopped 50 million pieces of fake news from the beginning of COVID pandemic, and that some 7,000 or 8,000 articles from the all fact-checking partners were read, explaining why something is not true and what is wrong with the story. And they're trying hard, I mean, social networks, they're trying, you know, to navigate you to World Health Organization pages or national pages, whatever. But, you know, the flood is so big that cannot really be stopped. They also have a statistic that some 95% of people, when they see a flag on Facebook, you know, you probably saw it, when something is false, there is, you know, kind of shadow over the story, and it says false, fact-checked by fact-checking organization. In Facebook, they said that some 95% of people then decides not to really share the story. I don't know whether it's true or not. We don't have these statistics. We actually don't know. What we receive in Faktograf is, you know, plenty of rage and hate, and who are you to tell me that blah blah. So I don't actually see this, you know, preventive moment that we are working on, or, you know, I'm not seeing that we are really helping, but we probably are. If there are some, you know, millions of stories that are not on internet or whose spread is reduced, probably we are helping, but, you know, we are just part of the bigger story, and, you know, everyday fighting, but the results we'll see.
I think you are
Whether
helping
it's the-
people like us from civil society, at least.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for the response.
Thank you, Sanja. Branka, will you share your thoughts on Nevena's questions?
Yes, thank you, Nevena. It's a huge question. I will try to sum it up. So first of all, self-isolation wasn't related with election processes in the manner of state election commission rules. So they didn't have any special connection. So the situation didn't have any special rules, didn't have any, or recommendations, didn't have any special part for people coming to Croatia to vote. At that moment, we had self-isolation rules and recommendations. As I know, only we had it only for the people coming from eastern neighboring countries, and it didn't have any kind of connection with the election period. Also, what is kind of maybe Sanja will know more than myself about this part with the people coming from Bosnia and Herzegovina to go to Croatia.
That's what I wanted to mention, because you said that was not related to election. Maybe it's not related, but we had, surging numbers in Bosnia. And then our authorities decided, to put people in self-isolation. And it lasted like 2 or 3 days. They didn't have to go to, they had to go to, and then they decided not to. And then the elections were there without the restrictions. And I suppose that, but there is one very good point to this. People from Croats from Bosnia, most of them have dual citizenship. That makes them European citizens. And when we decide with the other countries from the European Union not to have borders and restrictions among ourselves, that means the intention is not to have restrictions between, let's say, Slovenia and Croatia, or Germany and Croatia. But people, Croats from Bosnia, are European citizens too. So we cannot, what it actually looks like is, I guess, when you are on a border, and if you are Croat, you can pass and there is no corona problem. And if you are Serb or Bosniak, you should stop because there is a corona problem. This is what it read, I guess.
Yes, just briefly put it, if I may say, it didn't have any formal connection, but informal was very evident. So, yeah, is it, Nevena, is it good enough? So, okay.
I was muted again, sorry. So thank you, Sanja, thank you, Branka. We are running out of time, so we have a couple of questions more. Alexandra asked her question in the chat, so I will read it. And Fiona raised her hand. So after I read Alexandra's question, Fiona, you may ask yours. And then if someone else has some questions, please raise your hand now so we can address it. If not, these 2 questions will be the last 2 ones. So Alexandra says, first I want to thank Branka and Sanja for these interesting lectures. So, and I thank you as well. In order not to waste a lot of time, I will ask a question here. So Sanja, this question is for you. How did Croatia deal with the fake news? In Montenegro, the situation regarding the spread of false news during the corona was very worrying. We have a situation where the prosecution is prosecuting people who allegedly spread panic by sharing the news on their Facebook profile that the president of the state has been infected with the coronavirus. Just a second. There were other similar examples, but in essence, they all had a similar outcome.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can comment on that and tell.
Yeah, some countries introduced the new law regarding, among other things, sharing the fake news. Like there is another example of Hungary, and a new law that wasn't really in line with the European standards. I don't know whether that was the case with Montenegro as well. Some countries did it, some not. In Croatia, we didn't have any new regulation about fake news, but it can be punished by existing laws. It wasn't really something that was going on a large scale. So maybe if there was a case or two on the beginning, I don't remember now, but that was not a large problem. Really, I don't know anybody that was, but not just concerning COVID. We from time to time from Croatian Ministry of Culture and from some other Croatian authorities, they announced that we're going to place some regulations for social networks, because they think that maybe the existing laws cannot be really, relevant for the fake news on social networks. I mean, it's, we can make a debate about it because, spreading of panic and it's all in a criminal law. So I don't know, but I don't know about any of the cases of punishing the spreading of fake news. Branka maybe knows.
Yeah, just wanted to briefly add one thing. I think that is why it is very important, accordingly to our constitutional law experts, that this situation is a situation of a major natural disaster, and the Croatian Parliament really should decide to state it. So in each change of amendment and all amendments on each law regarding change of human rights should be brought by two-thirds majority of all the representatives. So it would be much safer for all of these happenings going on to be very strict about how we should react in the era of crisis, because our parliament can and should do it, and it has its own power on how to react in this kind of crisis.
But this was the stand of constitutional law experts, and that was the stand of some opposition parties. But the ruling party never actually decided to. They wanted to play it like everything's normal, because they were already planning the elections. So, there's less trouble, but they never actually stated anything in favor of using Article 17. They were just saying like Article 16, which is, kind of milder.
Yeah.
And actually, Plenković accused Bernardić on the debate before the elections. You were the one that wanted to impose the state of emergency, like it was, kind of Bernardić wanted, military coup kind of approach. So you are right, but there is no political will at all, I would say.
Actually, you have military situation when you don't have a parliament giving its own decision. So it's kind of picture, but that's Croatia. Yeah.
So I see no hands raised. Fiona said that she just forgot to lower her hand after her first question. So if anyone has, okay, no one has any questions. Sanja, thank you very much for being here with us, sharing your experience and knowledge on the fake news and everything that's happening in the region. Branka, thank you very much for explaining us these complicated issues regarding human rights and pandemic. And people, all of you who come here today, I know it's Friday and it's Friday afternoon, and I really am appreciative that you stick with us for this hour and a half, although I said it will be 1 hour. And we will have 2 or 3 more like these webinars at the end of during this year. So stick with us, like our PON Facebook page, and stay in touch, people, and stay safe. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Nevena.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.